So, hello everybody, Hare Krishna. We are standing literally, I would say, inside the old temple in the space. It's not here anymore. It was a two-story, just wooden house, typical. Not too different than that. I don't know. Well, you can't see it. Yes, southern house, and Prabhupada came here and stayed the night. We picked him up at the Jacksonville airport. And then there was a little walkway here, and the entrance to the house was right about here, this little porch. And so Prabhupada came, and of course the devotees were lining the walkway and throwing flowers, also from the roof, right?
Somebody said, I don't remember saying. But...
Yeah, and Ananga Manjari, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, she was a little under the weather. She was in charge of getting everything ready in the temple. And then Prabhupada came in, and then the temple room was really right about here. The temple room, and
yeah, because we were right on the street. It was the street.
Yeah,
not on the street, but it was right
facing. Yeah, so right around here was the temple room, and it was a two-story house. Prabhupada stayed downstairs just to this side, to my left. There was one room that had a carpet, the only room in the house with a carpet. We gave that room to Prabhupada, and he stayed there. And then back behind the temple room was the kitchen, and then upstairs there were, I think, 3 rooms. 2 rooms upstairs, and a bathroom. Only one bathroom upstairs.
Well, there was one downstairs, probably.
Right. We didn't notice things like that when we were young. The older you get, the more you pay attention to those things. So in those days, in ISKCON, householders that lived in the temple, they lived together. They were given a room. So my wife and I stayed in one room, and there was a room for the ladies and a room for the men, and then one bathroom. And of course, we knocked. So Amarendra was actually there before I got there. I was in New Orleans with my wife, Nanga Manjari, and then the GBC Sasarupa called up the New Orleans temple. I remember we were eating breakfast one day, and in the New Orleans temple, I was the temple president there was no longer in ISKCON, and no longer in good standing in any sense of the word. But I just thought I'm just trying to Krishna. Actually, I used to speak before I came to Gainesville. I could share this Grihastha Leela. Prabhupada sometimes spoke to me about his Grihastha life. So I remember that I used to talk to my wife then, Nanga Manjari, and we got to a point where it was so bad that almost every day we would discuss, like, should we ask the GBC to leave? Because in those days it was really an army and it was like military discipline. And we kept going back and forth, like, maybe we should just ask the GBC to get us out of here, go somewhere. Maybe we should open a center. We were talking about that all the time. And then I remember finally we came to a decision, and I came to a decision, and of course she agreed that let's just depend on Krishna. Krishna wants us somewhere else. He'll send us. So we just sort of came to that final decision. I don't know how long it would have lasted, but for the moment it was our final decision that we were just going to depend on Krishna. And then very soon after that, we were eating breakfast one time, sitting on the floor, eating with our hands, and there was a phone call. I don't know if we were allowed to answer the phone. It was like a really tough regime. So the temple president went and he answered the phone, and he came back and he said that they want you to be president of Gainesville. That was the GBC, Satsarupa. And so, because I was going to be president, I was given all consideration and actually we were given 2 seats on a Greyhound bus. We didn't have to hitchhike. I mean, when I was president of Gainesville, I used to go to Tallahassee sometimes. The president there, Janame Jai, invited me to come, and I'd go with my wife, and I'd give the Sunday lecture, and put on a little play, and so we used to hitchhike. I was trying to be a gentleman. So in those days, if you were like an ISKCON executive, like a temple president, you got to have a briefcase. So if you had a briefcase, you were an ISKCON executive. It was like a status symbol. So I had a briefcase. And I think Amarendra had the Gainesville Temple car back then was it was one of those Bonnevilles, Pontiac Bonnevilles. The motor was so big, like when you were driving, you'd put the windows down, stuck your arms out, you would actually fly. I mean, that thing had a huge engine. I think Amarendra would drive us to a certain. In those days, there was no I-75, and there was no I-10 or no freeway. So Amarendra would take us out to the highway that went to Tallahassee. He'd just drop us off, and then I would, trying to be a gentleman, so I would put my briefcase down, saying that so my wife could sit on it. That was like, and then I would hitchhike. Because that was made in culture. And so, and we would hitchhike to Tallahassee and do programs. And then after the Sunday program in Tallahassee, Janame Jai, the president, he would drive us, to the highway in Tallahassee. And then, same thing, Jai Prabhu, Hare Krishna obeisance. And then we'd hitchhike back to Gainesville. And so, anyway, so Prabhupada came here and he gave the talk on the Vyasasana built by Amarendra. And then Prabhupada took some prasadam, and I think the plaza program was at noon.
It was 12:30, 1 o'clock.
We went to the plaza, and we came back, and we went out again, and so was Sridham cooking for Prabhupada?
Yes. Probably.
Why don't you come here, Dharma?
Yeah, who's service name?
This is Dharma. Yeah, sit right next to him, and don't worry, he's not as dangerous as he looks. Dharma Das actually joined the temple in Gainesville. I remember your mother brought you.
Yeah, not exactly. She came to visit.
Or she came to visit. I remember she came to visit, yeah. Well, I mean, she came to visit, and then Dharma joined the temple. And so Dharma was a brahmachari. He was also there when Prabhupada came. Do you have any memories of that?
Yeah. I always remember a little bit when I was up there in front of everyone else. Yeah, it was a very nice time for me. I had actually met devotees in January of that same year.
71.
You were coming when Gargamuni was.
Yeah. Gargamuni was the first.
Coming to the original Krishna.
So in Gargamuni, I've actually met Gargamuni in December. And then we had the Christmas break, and then I came back, and for a few days I didn't see anyone out there. And then Gargamuni came out and said, "Oh, we just opened up a new center." That was where you're living. So,
Amarendra.
yeah. So he took me over there, and then I started going there every day, taking prasadam, and Brahmananda, Swami at the time, he came down from Tallahassee. And he brought some packages of beads. We had to make our own beads. So he brought down these packages of beads, and I sat there writing the very, very original beads place, and strung up my beads, and I started chanting 62 rounds right there.
And then he started coming. I mean, he started coming to the classes. And then one day he said he wanted to move into the temple.
Yeah, the summer came, and I had to decide because to go home for the summer break, as a student, I had been a student. So if I went home for the summer break, then I wouldn't see devotees for a few months. And I figured, how am I going to practice this at home? My parents wouldn't understand. So I said, I had no choice. I advised. So it's just better just drop out of school. It's way back then.
Actually, what I meant was, I'm just kidding.
No, but for
Yeah, that's what we did in those days.
I said I want to practice Krishna consciousness, but I also have my parents were putting me through school. So what should I do? Should I?
You were an engineering student, right?
Yeah, starting.
You used to say, I want to be an engineer for Krishna.
I
Gargamuni was very proud of you because you were a scientific engineering guy. And Gargamuni used to brag about him and ignore the rest of us.
so I had to make that choice because the summer was there and
Right.
parents were going.
So then when Prabhupada came, we sort of fast forward to when Prabhupada came. And what was your impression when you saw Prabhupada?
I was impressed. I was a little bit, dull. I couldn't really appreciate Srila Prabhupada really as I could appreciate now. That comes with some maturity and practice in Krishna consciousness. But I was very much impressed. And then when he came, and then that night when we were given the opportunity to be initiated, I was very surprised I was even being asked because I had only lived inside the temple for about 3 weeks at the time. I'd been coming for months. For months,
Yeah, we fast tracked you.
But I was given the opportunity for initiation, and of course, I accepted it.
Very good, very good. So Amarendra, why don't you say a few words? Because you about
A lawyer saying a few words with that, it's not possible. You really covered everything. I mean, my personal memory was that I stayed back at the temple here because me and Nanga Manjari were cleaning literally every nook and cranny. And I remember in that front porch, I was just finished mopping the floors. And I was putting the bucket and the mop away. And I looked up, and then the car pulled up, and I looked up, and then all of a sudden, like in a heartbeat, Prabhupada was coming up the steps just as I was putting everything
which is
away.
actually right here. Which is literally just right here where we're standing.
Yeah, and he just came up, and it was like he was so youthful and so full of so much energy.
That was 1971, so Prabhupada was, it was July, it was before his birthday.
77.
Yeah, 77. My God, 5 years older, 5.5 years older than I am today. But, yeah, so that was it. It was right here, and this was a temple. Srila Prabhupada stayed here. And then the next morning we drove. I'll tell you one little story, just see what it was like in ISKCON back then. We were sitting in the back seat of the car. There was a driver, and then Prabhupada was in the front. And then in the back seat was Aravinda, Prabhupada's secretary, who was very often not in a good mood. And Sri Dhamma, who was the president of Miami, and myself. And so Sri Dham, somehow or other, and all the stuff, he discovered the remnants in the back seat of Prabhupada's breakfast. And the servant, Aravinda, that was like, he wanted it. And so I remember when Sri Dham said, hey, and you couldn't say anything because Prabhupada was right in the front seat. And so he was like, they say if looks could kill. And so when he saw that we had found the Mahaprasadam, which is really good, and we started tasting, he was going crazy. He was going crazy in the back seat. He was so agitated he couldn't say anything because Prabhupada was right. And we had partly just happily eating it. So all this going on, and Prabhupada was in the front seat, just chanting Hare Krishna.
Did you ever tell them about the bead incident at the initiation? When we didn't have neck beads. And when Prabhupada was in the middle of initiating us, and then all of a sudden he noticed we didn't have any neck beads. So Prabhupada stopped the initiation, and he goes, he looked at you and Sridham, he said, where are their neck beads? And you guys were like trying to make an exit from the room as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I was 22 years old.
Oh, you were the temple president, and so he wasn't.
Yeah, we didn't. So the Prabhupada did stay up quite some time answering questions, giving initiation.
Well, after midnight.
He really spent an hour or two in the evening with us. And the next morning, of course, he had breakfast. Then he went back. We took him back to the airport, and he flew off back to the airport.
we had to get before the fire sacrifice next morning.
Oh yeah. Actually, Prabhupada left, and then after Prabhupada left, we did the fire sacrifice initiates. So, any questions about that visit or about the temple here? Oh, I'll tell you one funny thing about the temple. There was, because sannyasi had come, and there was so when I came in the temple room, I said, "Where's the altar?" I think either I or my wife asked, and there was a little picture of Krishna about this big that was pasted onto a little metal radiator or something like that, and that was the altar. And so my wife and I, we went it's just like 2 blocks from here. There was one of those old department stores like Newberry's or something. Woolworths. There was a department store just a couple of blocks right downtown. So that's the first thing we did is we walked over to the department store and bought some picture frames. And we had some pictures of Krishna and Prabhupada from the Bhakti magazines, and we made a little altar. That's the first thing we did. And then I'll tell you another funny story, because it's also the 50th anniversary of this Gainesville Center. And when I was a kid, my mother would, often give us mixed vegetables for dinner with the other stuff. And for some reason, and this is very irrational, I didn't like lima beans. So the first thing I do, my mother gave me a plate for dinner, is I, move aside all the lima beans. And so then when we were in Gainesville, a little while after we came there, someone donated like a 50-pound bag of lima beans. And I thought, okay, I really took it. That was a sign that I was now on the spiritual platform. And so
lima bean dal.
We had lima beans for breakfast, for lunch,
lima bean
for
sabzi.
dinner. Yeah, everything. Lima bean cake. I mean, it was just lima beans. And so I thought that was really funny that Krishna did that. One time, this is just a general Gainesville Preaching Center program. One time, I thought we should, spread Krishna, do a little traveling sankirtan. So my wife and I went, and we took your car.
What's in my car?
Yeah, the temple car. And so we went to Jacksonville, because in those days, devotees live very simply. Basically, it's like spiritual life on 35 cents a day. And so, naturally, there was no question of getting a hotel room or anything like that. We didn't think, but so we camped out. We camped out on Jacksonville Beach, and actually they had these little sand flies these sand flies. And so we woke up in the morning, and literally our heads were like as big as pumpkins. Seriously, it was like our heads were like this. It was like we could have started in some kind of alien sci-fi movie. So we went to the Jacksonville hospital, public hospital emergency room where you wait. You probably die of old age before they actually see you. And so we were waiting and waiting, and we just finally left. Our heads started to shrink again. So they thought, the devil thought we were going out for this glorious preaching tour. We'll be back someday.
Well, we had a kirtan when they left. It was such a big celebration, traveling sankirtan, with all this hoopla and fanfare. The conquering heroes were going out, and when they came back, all
next day,
swollen and limping.
Well, we did have ecstatic kirtans. We did have very, very ecstatic kirtans. We had really ecstatic classes. A lot of people joined the temple, including Hare Krishna and Dharma and others. Yes?
Did you start Krishna lunch after Srila Prabhupada's visit?
No, that was a mistake. I forget, someone said that. We didn't call it. No, actually, Krishna lunch started from the beginning, before I got there. Gargamuni, isn't it?
He was giving us simply wonderfuls, and he gave us some other things.
Yeah. But when I got there,
well, Krishna lunch started in that apartment we had,
Yeah.
2 blocks of campus. 100 students a day were coming over for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then after Gargamuni went to Pakistan, Prabhupada sent him to Pakistan, we got kicked out because so many people coming. And that's when we moved here.
yeah, so when I came, they were giving out, but it wasn't like, it wasn't nearly as elaborate. We'd go to campus and get up some shop. What Amarendra would do that. So, but definitely Prasad distribution started before Prabhupada came. Yes.
Can you tell us more about, they tried to shut down Krishna lunch, and they arrested Narendra Prabhu
I don't think, was that when I was there? Was that before?
This was when we were in Depot. We had Depot by then.
Oh no, no, that's many years later. And Amarendra bought this beautiful, beautiful property over on Depot. Now it's all these big apartment buildings. And he was an old, like anti-Vietnam activist. He used to actually physically fight with the police and everything. And so,
Once.
so he, when they told him he had to leave campus, he like, he's like resistance pastors. They had to drag him off the campus. What to him?
Well, it's interesting because I actually had written a letter to Prabhupada because I asked him if civil disobedience was permissible. Could we resort to civil disobedience? And Prabhupada said, yes, as a last resort, but better to use lawyers because we've had so much success in the courts. So that was very practical. But what happened on that famous incident in the plaza, the Christians were very envious of him. And I don't want to offend any Christians, but back then they were very hardcore, fanatical, born-again Christians, and we were heathen and devil worshippers,
Idol worshippers,
and the whole 9 yards. And so we would have all these students every day taking lunch and sitting around chanting and just talking and preaching, and they were so envious because nobody would go over to and listen to them. So they turned us into the university. That why are you letting these people do this? And they complained, and it was like bigwigs in these big Christian organizations. They told me this at the police station. So when they came to arrest us or tell us to leave, we said, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to stay here. If you want us off campus, well, be my guest. So they did carry me off. I was the sacrificial lamb. And there was a riot afterwards where the students were so livid, they were so outraged that they would try to stop Krishna lunch, that they took the prasadam and started throwing it at the cops. Oh. That's true. They did that. They were throwing the prasadam that was still there at the cops. And the cops, I remember there was one guy, his name was Vipperman, and I had known him from the anti-war days. He was a campus detective, and I remember him from those days, and he knew me, and he was an ex-football player, big 350-pound guy. And he said, Mr. Lieberman, I'm really sorry we have to do this, but if you don't move, we're going to have to remove you. I said, be my guest. And it got in the newspapers, the Gainesville Sun and the Alligator, and they were saying, why are you doing this? These people are giving out free food and they're beating students. Why are you shutting them down? It was such a big outrage in the whole community. But ultimately, we went to court and we defeated the regulation that they were enforcing against us. And we've never had any trouble since then.
So, anyway, maybe we'll end here. So thank you all very much for coming. And 50 years ago today, probably almost around this time of day, 50 years ago, Prabhupada walked up here and into one of his temples.
And the one last thing is that in those days, the devotees around the movement didn't know what Gainesville was. They'd never heard of it. So when we go up to
except college football fans.
Yeah, that's what we had to say, the Florida Gators. And they say, oh, that place. We go up to New Vrindavan, New York, when probably, and we say, they'd say, where are you from? So we're from Gainesville. We go, what? They had never heard of it before. And in 1971, for Prabhupada to come here in 1971, before he had been to Miami, or Atlanta, or any of these other temples, New Orleans, he came here. When we were just an outpost in the wilderness.
Yeah, we invited him. Prabhupada set a condition, and we got the money, and Prabhupada came. So, thank you all very much.
One question.
Yes.
So when you came, did you come from this direction?
No, this way, from there. He's coming from Jacksonville.
No, I mean when he actually came to the business center.
Yeah, he drove up this way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he would have come this way.
You walked that way?
No, we parked right here in front.
And you walked across
You just
the-
know the steps were right here.
All right.
The entrance to the house is right where, about where you are. Okay, thank you all very much for coming. Hare Krishna.